guys, how's it going? Hope you're having a beautiful day. It's Chika from Gainesville Realty, and today we bring you what's real in real estate, where we talk about everything that's real in real estate in Lagos, beyond Lagos, and global, but we call focus in Lagos State. If you're just joining us for the first time, we're super excited to have you here. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us likes, give us comments, and give us shares. And also, if you're following on Instagram, Gainesville Realty is the handle. Now today we'll be talking about something very interesting. The Lagos State government has just passed a new bill. It's called the Lagos State Real Estate Bill. Now, the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has signed a bill regulating real estate transactions in the state, in line with his commitment to sanitize the sector and protect residents' interests across Lagos. Now, Sanwo-Olu said the new bill will help to regulate real estate transactions, will help to protect the citizens and unsuspecting Lagosians who fall prey to many real estate professionals. Interesting. The law will also help players in the real estate sector to know what is expected of them, and for government to be able to track who is doing what in the sector. It is really about ease of doing business and ensuring that we can continue to attract private sector investments into the real estate space. All right, so let's get into this particular bill. Now, the very first clause that I would like to talk about is the part where it says the law is supposed to regulate real estate transactions, and I absolutely and completely agree, and I'll tell you why, right? And it also says it's supposed to protect unsuspecting Lagosians who fall prey to many real estate professionals. I think there's a bit of contradiction there. There's a bit of irony and a paradox right there. So on the one hand, if you have real estate professionals who know what they're doing, who are actually certified to be professionals, and then you have unsuspecting Lagosians falling prey to them, there's a bit of a mismatch somewhere there. So what I would say is I do agree with the fact that the real estate industry, especially in Lagos, I'll speak because I operate mostly within Lagos, so the real estate industry in Lagos does require minding and restructuring. I do agree that the real estate space needs a bit of structuring, a bit of sanitation, a bit of control, regulation if you have it, and I've broken it down to 3 areas. So the industry players, pricing, which they don't really have absolute control over, pricing, and then quality control. So let's first talk about industry players, right? So right now we operate a free market where literally anybody can lay claims to being a developer, an engineer or contractor or whatever, or even like brokers and realtors, right? So it seems that there are no enforceable laws as to how you get certified to play any of those roles in the real estate space, right? So anytime they can hire you, really can come into the industry, say, I'm a broker, I'm a realtor, I can sell you property, without you having any means to actually verify and say, okay, they are who they say they are. There's some players who of course have taken the time to go through the process, but you also have to understand that it's a free market where literally anybody can lay claims to being a developer or being like a realtor or an agent without really having the necessary certifications to back it up. So in that regard, of course, I do agree that the industry needs a bit of structuring and regulation. Also in terms of pricing, now I know that a lot of people in recent times have complained, and I see this all over social media and even like off the online space, right? I see a lot of people talking about how overpriced and how exorbitant the prices, the price tags that certain real estate assets are capped at in the market today, right? So everybody talks about how outrageous, how overly priced real estate is in Lagos. Maybe not in other Lagos, Abuja, maybe, and I understand, right? There are other factors. However, I do know that certain prices are pegged arbitrarily, and maybe because sometimes it's possible to get away with it, and that's where regulation comes in. But I also know for a fact that there are so many factors that go into why real estate is priced the way it is, from the location of property to even like going back to the government itself. Like, look at the rigors. Like, if you as a developer, for instance, had to get access or take control, take ownership of land plots, like there's so much that goes into it, you don't even know, so much that goes into actually acquiring that asset and making it available to the end user. So in between all of the expenses that I incurred when even like trying to do your due diligence, trying to facilitate your paperwork, trying to pay up all the taxes and levies and governmental fees, all of that put together, and even the prices at which the land is gotten itself, all of that comes together, as well as a location and current market value for lands in certain locations. All of that come together to actually determine price. And so I feel like pricing is not something that really the government can regulate in its entirety, right? And then number 3, quality control. I absolutely know that when it comes to this particular one, the government has so much to do in ensuring that real estate projects, developments that are done the space, that we ensure that quality goes into the construction, the way it is constructed, the materials that are used, the experts and collaborators who are involved, with putting up the structures, and just ensuring that at every step of the way, that quality control, takes place, and that we really can trust that buildings have integrity, right? This is very important. So in these 3 key areas, the industry players, pricing relatively, and also quality control, I honestly feel that yes, it is time. I mean, I have to be honest. If we're being honest, my fellow industry players, we have to be honest. It's a welcome development if some sort of strategic and actual regulation, not a winch hunt, actual regulation actually happens in the real estate industry. It's about time. I mean, look at what's happening in other parts of the world. You can see that we're still behind when it comes to actually ensuring that there's a system through which things happen, and it makes it seamless. It benefits everyone in the long term, and it makes it seamless. That way accountability can happen, transparency can happen, and we know who to hold responsible if anything goes south. All right, so let's go back to the Lagos State Real Estate Bill, right? If truly at the core of this bill is the need to strengthen government and citizen partnerships and to ensure that the ultimate interests of Lagosians are protected, I would break it down into 2 major things. Every Lagosian, every citizen living in Lagos State, ultimately, when it comes to the real estate sector, I'm sure that ultimately what we want is to be able to first invest in real estate affordably, right? To ensure that we can break the barriers that prevents anyone from safely investing in real estate. And so number 1 is, of course, affordability. So the question of affordability definitely is tied to this issue. Number 1, affordability, and number 2, authentically investing. So I feel like if these 2 issues can be addressed, where every Lagosian in Lagos State can affordably invest in property, if there is, of course, a supply of properties, number 1, inventory. So there's inventory, it's affordable, and what you actually pay for, you get. If these 3 things are catered to, then I can say that ultimately we are able to cater to the interests of Lagosians. And that brings us back to what the government talks about when it says strengthening the citizens and government relationship, such that the government can actually view and more like track everything that's going on in the industry. So how is this supposed to happen? Literally, how are you going to be able to, as a government, track all of the real estate processes that are happening in the sector? So this then means that there is a need for digitization. So all of our processes have to be automated. And I know that the Lagos State government is trying to some extent imbibe some digital methods, especially with the acquisition of lands, like in the lands registry. But there's so much more that still begs to be done. This is the only way that we can actually ensure that we're tracking processes across board in Lagos State. Imagine if we had a portal where every and any real estate transaction, if you wanted to know how many assets we had in Lagos State in the market, if you wanted to know how many commercial properties, how many lands that are now on the market available to investors, if we had a portal where with a bird's eye view you can view all of this, anybody, realtor, developer, investor, citizen, anybody can actually view all of this on a portal, a digital portal where it is free flow of information for everyone. Imagine how that would greatly simplify and enhance tracking mechanisms. So I honestly feel like this is one way that we can ultimately cater to the interest of Lagosians, whether it's with things that have to do with land registration, title perfection, getting approval documents. All of that needs to happen digitally. Another very important factor to consider is intervention funds and financing. Now, you and I know that the real estate industry here in Nigeria is one where a lot of developers actually have to self-fund majority of their capital intensive projects. Real estate is capital intensive, right? And so almost every developer, I mean, if you had to go the loan route, imagine like getting loans to float your project in the double digits sphere, and think about how that would then translate to affordability or the lack of it, from the viewpoint of an investor. This also trickles to pricing, which ensures that the vast majority of Nigerians can hardly, afford like good investments. And so when the government speaks about the interests, ensuring that the interests of Lagosians are protected, affordability is very key. And so imagine how easier it would be if developers across board could actually get access to funding with low interest rates or zero interest rates, or even get into some sort of private public partnership with the government, where, for instance, the government makes land affordable to developers through some sort of maybe joint venture. So the government makes land available to developers develop, and even if they do have to make some financial recourse to the government, it's at low rate, right? And that way they can then make sure that this investment assets are provided to investors at really affordable rates. So funding is such a big issue, and I feel like it's about time that the government actually looks into this. So, while you're trying to say, oh well and good, you want to regulate the industry, you want to sanitize the industry, if you're kicking out the bad eggs, if you're trying to kick out the bad eggs, we need to ensure that there are good eggs in the crate first, right? And so these are the ways that we can ensure that it's a healthy, thriving environment for industry players to actually do good work and offer quality and affordable investment assets for teeming Nigerians. So now let's talk about the role that infrastructure provision plays in all of this, right? Whether it's the provision of infrastructure, maintenance, and completion. You and I know that the big cities, all of the major cities in Lagos are saturated, right, with population. So imagine that, and as population continues to explode, you and I know that there's even more need for infrastructure, whether it's bigger roads, wider roads, connecting bridges, alternative roads. All of these in the long run tend to aid the life and comfort and the convenience of Lagosians, right? So imagine if the government plays an active role and takes active steps to provide infrastructure in smaller inner cities, in the boroughs. For instance, the Ekpe is fast becoming like a big city right now. Like, there's a lot of attention going towards that access. So imagine that the government begins to take practical steps to actually ensure that infrastructure that caters to those kind of cities, whether it's road, whether it's provision of jobs, industries. Imagine that the government actually caters to all of that, and people can now begin to move away. There can be less saturation and density in big cities, and people can then begin to move to less saturated cities because infrastructure is provided, and they can live quality and comfortable lives in those areas. Now think about it. Lands in Ekpe would definitely right now not be as expensive as lands in Lekki or Aja. What this means is that I can, for instance, comfortably say, oh, okay, I'm moving to Ekpe. I can find work in Ekpe. There are markets in Ekpe. There's recreational life in Ekpe. I can get around easily. If I had to be in Lekki, I can get to Lekki really easily and get a job and move and commute to and fro. Think about how that can impact the life of the Lagosians and even aid them into making affordable investment. So that way they know I don't have to invest in Aja. I can invest in Ekpe and even live in my investment, right? So it just makes sense that the government also looks into providing infrastructure in smaller emerging cities or even cities that haven't emerged. And lastly, I would like to touch on affordability. So much talk about it, and I honestly feel that there's little action about it. So sometime last year in November 2021, the federal government had launched the National Housing Program, and the idea behind the National Housing Program was to ensure that affordable housing would be provided to Nigerians, right? So it was stipulated that for as low as 9.2 million naira, you could get a one-bedroom apartment. Now the locations were not specified. Now, but when you talk about affordability is relative. For instance, 9.2 million naira for a one-bedroom apartment, where exactly? It definitely cannot be anywhere within the Lekki Aja axis. It's probably within the outskirts of Lagos, or in other cities, or in the west, or in the east, right? Now, 9.2 million naira for affordable housing for a country where more than 82.9 million Nigerians live in poverty. That is above 40.1% of the nation's population. So when you think about it, wherever these affordable housing schemes will be, will people who currently live in that particular geographical location, who live in those states, will they find it affordable to be able to cough out 9.2 million naira for a one-bedroom apartment within their communities? Will those locations where the 9.2 million naira homes be made available, will those locations be locations where people like you and I would want to move and live in? So these are the issues. Just to cap it up, we talk about the fact that the government is trying to put in legislation, regulation, and structure in the real estate industry. It's a very welcome development, absolutely, but there's so much to be done. If ultimately the government says at the heart of this bill is ensuring that they can strengthen partnerships or relationships with citizens and the government, ensuring that the interests of Lagosians are catered to, then that's a one-sided narrative, that's a one-sided conversation. There's so much that goes into ensuring that we can have a very healthy, active environment where investment opportunities are affordable to everyone, to every Lagosian or every Nigerian. And so the government needs to look at it from a holistic point of view. So just talking about regulating the industry alone is not going to suffice, isn't enough. And so these are my thoughts. I'd like to hear from you. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this new real estate bill that the Lagos state government has passed? And that's our show today. Thank you so much for sticking around to this point. Please, if you like this content, feel free to actually like it. Follow the YouTube page Gainesville Realty Chika and follow us on Instagram Gainesville. We will be bringing you a lot more of informational and just edifying content. It's been Chika from Gainesville Realty. Ciao.